Okay, let's just jump right in with a question that, pops up all through history. What happens when a small, lightly armed group decides to take on a huge, powerful army? I mean, on paper, it looks like a guaranteed loss, but that's not always how it plays out.
Not at all. It's the classic David versus Goliath story, right? And it really forces you to look past the obvious things, like who has more tanks or soldiers.
Mhm.
We're talking about guerrilla warfare.
That name itself is so interesting. It comes from Spanish, guerrilla, which just means little war.
Exactly. It got really popular back in the 1800s during the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon's huge army was occupying Spain, and they ran into these Spanish resistance fighters. They weren't soldiers in uniforms.
Right, they were just regular people who refused to fight a normal battle. Instead, they just kept up these constant, small, harassing attacks.
And that's where the name stuck. But the tactics themselves, I mean, they're ancient. You can go all the way back to resistance movements against the Roman Empire or even in ancient China.
It seems like the common thread is that smaller group using, well, unconventional methods against a much bigger power. And the key difference is they don't wear uniforms. Their biggest strength is that they can just blend in with everyone else. That's their first and maybe most powerful defense. They can just disappear.
So if you're this smaller force, what's your actual goal? You know you can't win a big head-to-head battle.
Right. And the goal is not to win a single big fight. It's all about a slow, patient strategy. It's about wearing the enemy down.
Like a war of attrition. You want to make the conflict just too expensive, too frustrating for the bigger army to keep fighting over months or maybe even years.
Exactly. You want to make it so costly for them in money and supplies and morale that they eventually just give up and go home. The success is measured by how much damage they can do compared to how few losses they take.
And that's why they don't attack the enemy's main force. They go for the weak
The
spots.
soft spots, yeah.
Yeah.
They attack things like supply lines, communication centers,
Yeah.
anything to create confusion and, honestly, fear. So every time they successfully raid a supply convoy, the big army loses those supplies. But it's more than that, isn't it?
Oh, much more. Because now that army has to spend even more resources protecting all their other convoys. They have to pull soldiers away from the front lines just to guard trucks on a road. It forces them to spread their strength thin, which is exactly what the guerrilla fighters want.
But I think the one advantage they have that a big army can never copy is knowing the land.
You absolutely cannot overstate how important that is. For the guerrilla fighter, the terrain, the landscape, it's both a shield and a weapon. They use thick forests or mountains, swamps, places where it's hard to be seen.
And you'd think with modern tech, like satellites and drones, that advantage would disappear. But it doesn't.
It really doesn't. Deep jungle cover, underground tunnels, a lot of that high-tech gear is still not very effective against that. Plus, the local fighter knows every little path, every hidden water source, things that are not on any map.
And you contrast that with the invading army. They're trying to move heavy equipment like tanks and big trucks through these really difficult environments.
And it just slows them down. They become predictable. The guerrillas, on the other hand, are moving fast with light gear. It's a huge mismatch.
Okay, let's talk about the specific tactics. The one everyone knows is the hit and run.
Yeah, and the key to the hit and run is speed. It's a super fast, coordinated strike on one specific, vulnerable target, maybe a fuel truck or a small outpost.
And then what?
The second they've done the damage, they're gone. They just melt back into the jungle or into the city streets before the bigger army can even really respond.
So the big army can't even use its massive firepower because by the time they're ready to shoot, there's no one there to shoot at.
Exactly. And the psychological effect of that is huge. The soldiers are never allowed to rest. They're kept in this constant state of stress, of paranoia, because they never know when the next little attack is coming.
The second big tactic is the ambush,
Right.
which is a little different.
It is. An ambush is a surprise attack from a totally hidden position. You wait for the enemy to come to you. You set up at a place they have to pass through, like a narrow bridge or a road through a canyon.
And I've read they often use traps, too. Things to slow down anyone who tries to chase them.
For sure. Simple but effective things, like pits or tripped wires. Anything to make sure they can get away clean after the attack.
And none of this works without absolute secrecy. If their plans or their location gets discovered, it's pretty much over.
Secrecy is their best defense. They have to move at night, or in bad weather, to avoid being seen from the air. They rarely stay in one place for long.
So how do they communicate?
Very carefully. They use codes or hidden messages, sometimes just trusted messengers. They can't rely on radios that can be tracked.
Okay, so we've covered the tactics and the terrain. But maybe the most important factor is the people, the local population.
This is the absolute key. A guerrilla movement cannot survive, let alone win, without the support of the local people.
Because the locals provide everything, right? Food, water, a place to hide, and information. Crucial information about what the enemy is doing.
Absolutely. There's that famous saying that the fighter must move among the people like a fish in water.
Which means if the public turns against the fish, the movement just dies.
It drowns. Yeah. And that means treating the public with respect is a vital part of the strategy. If the fighters start to bully the local population, their support will dry up instantly and they'll fail.
Let's talk about their gear for a second. We know they don't have tanks or fighter jets. So what are they using?
Mostly light equipment. Rifles, grenades, and very often they use captured weapons. Taking weapons from the enemy is a huge win. It arms them and it demoralizes the other side at the same time.
And they often use homemade explosives. Simple stuff. They have to carry everything on their backs.
Right, so survival gear is often more important than heavy weapons.
Which brings up the hardest challenge of all. Supplies. How do you feed and arm an army that's always hiding and moving?
It is their single biggest challenge. They don't have big supply trucks, so they rely on a few things. First, hidden caches. They'll bury food, ammo, and medical supplies in caves or just in the ground in remote spots.
And they raid enemy convoys, like we mentioned, but that's super risky.
It is. So they also have to rely on getting supplies from outside, maybe smuggled across a border from a friendly country. Logistics becomes its own secret operation.
When you put it all together, the hit and run, the ambushes, it feels like the real goal isn't just physical damage, it's mental.
That's it exactly. The psychological impact is often way more powerful. You have to imagine being one of those soldiers. You're on patrol, and any person you see, any car, any doorway could be a threat. You can't trust anyone.
That constant fear must be exhausting. It wears down morale. Soldiers just want to finish their tour and go home.
And when that feeling takes over, the war is already being lost, not on the battlefield, but in the minds of the soldiers.
And we should probably mention, this isn't just something that happens in jungles or mountains. It happens in cities, too.
Right, urban warfare. And a big city can be an even better environment for a guerrilla fighter. They can use tall buildings, underground tunnels, and huge crowds to hide and move around.
And for the big army, it's a nightmare. They can't use their heavy weapons like big bombs without hurting tons of innocent people.
And if they do that, they just create more enemies. It forces them to fight street by street, house by house, which is slow, dangerous, and it costs them a lot of soldiers.
So after all this pressure, this long, grinding conflict, how does it usually end?
Well, there are basically three main ways it can wrap up. The first is that the small group actually gets stronger and stronger until it becomes a real army and wins a final decisive victory.
Okay, what's the second way?
The second, and this is probably the most common, is that the bigger country just gets tired of it all. The war becomes too expensive, too many of their soldiers have died, and the public back home is protesting. So they sign a peace treaty and leave. They just get worn out.
And the third way is it fails.
It fails. The movement just fades away because the bigger army succeeds in cutting off all their supplies, and they lose the support of the local people.
So what this all really shows is that having the biggest army doesn't guarantee you're going to win. Sometimes a clever strategy and the support of the people can be a much more powerful force.
Absolutely. And these lessons are studied all over the world today because they prove that persistence and smart thinking can stand up against overwhelming odds.
It really leaves you with a final question to think about. As conflicts move more into the digital world, into cyberspace, what does knowing the terrain even mean when the battlefield is all online?
Good luck with your studies.